It's the question you've probably asked at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling. The one question every human being eventually asks, and the one nobody seems able to answer. What actually happens when you die? 2,500 years ago, in northern India, a grieving mother carried her dead son through an entire city, begging for medicine to bring him back. What she was given instead is where this starts. This isn't comforting quotes someone made up online. Every answer here is traced to a real text. The earliest discourses first, and where we reach for a later one, I'll say so. Because here's the surprising part. When people asked the Buddha what happens after death, and they asked him constantly, he gave 3 very different kinds of answers. One is a story the commentaries tell. One is a refusal recorded in the discourses themselves. And one is an image of fire that philosophers still argue about. By the end of this video, you'll know all 3. And you might find that the question itself changes shape. Let's start with the mother. The ancient commentaries to the Dhammapada preserve her story. Her name was Kisa Gotami, Gotami the Frail. She grew up poor in Savatthi, one of the great cities of ancient India. She married into a wealthy family that treated her, at first, like the poor girl she was. Everything changed when she gave birth to a son. Suddenly she mattered. Suddenly she belonged. And then, just as he was old enough to run, the boy died. No warning, no reason anyone could give her. Grief does strange things to a mind. The texts say she refused to accept it. She lifted her son onto her hip and went from house to house asking for medicine. People turned away. Some laughed. Medicine for a dead child? Finally, one kind stranger understood what she really needed and pointed her toward a teacher staying at the edge of the city. She pushed through the crowd and laid her son at the Buddha's feet. "Give me medicine for my boy," she begged. And the Buddha looked at her and said yes. Yes, he would make the medicine himself. He needed one ingredient: a handful of mustard seeds. Mustard seeds were in every kitchen in India. This was like asking for a pinch of salt. But there was one condition. The seeds had to come from a house where no one had ever died. No parent lost, no child, no servant, not one. She ran. First house. Of course we have mustard seeds. And has anyone died here? The woman's face fell. My husband, last year. Second house, a grandmother, gone that spring. Third, a daughter. Fourth, a brother. House after house, street after street, everyone had seeds. And every single house had its dead. Somewhere in that long afternoon, the counting changed. She stopped counting houses that could save her son and started counting houses that carried the same weight she did. By sunset, she was sitting at the edge of the city, the lamps of 1,000 homes coming on below her. The lamp that changed everything comes later, after she ordained, watching one flame rise and gutter out. She wasn't running anymore. She buried her son. Then she walked back to the Buddha, not for medicine this time, for the teaching. Her own verses survive in the Therigatha, the oldest collection of women's poetry on earth. She became a nun, and the tradition records she reached full awakening. Now, notice what just happened. She came for medicine. The Buddha never gave her one. He answered something deeper. How do you live in a world where everyone you love is temporary? Hold that, because the next man who asked demanded a real answer. The Majjhima Nikaya, one of the oldest collections of the Buddha's recorded talks, tells of a monk named Milindapanha, smart, restless, and quietly furious. One afternoon in Jita's Grove, he counted up everything the Buddha had never answered. Is the universe eternal? Is it infinite? Is the soul the same as the body? And after death, does a Buddha exist, not exist, both, or neither? 10 questions. The famous 10 unanswered questions. And Milindapanha had had enough. He marched to the Buddha with an ultimatum. Answer them, or I quit. You can find this conversation today, word for word, in Sutta MN 63. The Buddha's reply starts almost playfully. Did I ever promise you answers to these when you joined? No, the monk admits. And then the Buddha gives him one of the most famous images in the history of philosophy. A man is struck by an arrow, thick with poison. His friends run for a surgeon, but the wounded man stops them. Wait, before anyone pulls this out, who shot me? What's his name? His clan? Is he tall or short? Dark or fair? What kind of bow? What sort of string? Was the shaft wild reed or planted? What feathers on it? Vulture? Heron? Peacock? The Buddha's point lands like a hammer. That man would die with every question still open. The poison doesn't wait for answers. The arrow is already in, he tells Milindapanha. Birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow. And what he says he teaches is not the metaphysics. It's suffering, its cause, its end, and the path there. Whether the universe is eternal or not, the arrow stays. Whether a Buddha exists after death or not, the arrow stays. That's why those 10 questions got silence. Notice, he never said there is no answer. He said answering wouldn't help, and that's different. Some questions are built wrong, the way asking what's north of the North Pole is. The discourses don't put it that way. They just leave it standing. Some people hear this and think it's the wisest move in the history of religion. Others think it's the most brilliant dodge. Both camps have argued for 25 centuries. But one wanderer refused to let it go. He came back again and again with the same question. And for him, the Buddha finally reached for a flame. His name was Vacchagotta, a professional philosopher, a wandering debater, the kind of man who collected positions the way others collect coins. Sutta MN 72 records their exchange. Vacha runs the whole list. After death, does an awakened one exist? Not exist? Both? Neither? 4 options, the complete logical menu of his era. 4 times, the Buddha declines every option. Vacha is baffled. Honestly, most first-time readers are too. So the Buddha turns to something burning nearby. Suppose this fire went out, he asks. Would you say it went east, west, north, or south? Vacha answers that the question doesn't apply. The fire burned while there was fuel. The fuel ran out. Asking which direction it went is asking the wrong thing. That, the Buddha says, is the point. He is no longer measurable by any of those terms. That's the move in the discourse, not an answer, but a dismantling of the question. All four options assume there is something left to locate. The sutta says there isn't. Watch a flame go out sometime. Really watch it. Trying to say where it went is like trying to grab the space where it was. The sutta's own image for an awakened one, freed from clinging, deep and boundless, like the great ocean. So, is that annihilation? Nothing at all? No. The Buddha explicitly rejected nothing as firmly as he rejected forever. Annihilationism, the idea that death is a full stop, he called one extreme. Eternalism, an unchanging soul living on, the other. His teaching threads between them. Which raises the obvious question: if there's no permanent soul, what could possibly continue? What actually carries on? This is where Buddhism gets genuinely different from every answer you've heard before, and honestly, more interesting. Because the Buddha's answer to what continues starts by dismantling something you're carrying right now. The idea that there's a fixed you, even today, even while you're alive. Buddhism teaches that what you call yourself is 5 processes running together: body, feeling, perception, mental habits, consciousness, the 5 aggregates, all of them changing every single moment. Much of your body has quietly replaced itself. Your opinions at 15 would embarrass you now. Even the you who started this video is very slightly gone. So when Buddhists say no permanent soul, they don't just mean after death. They mean now. There was never a frozen you to preserve in the first place. Then what continues at death? A later Buddhist classic, The Questions of King Milinda, gives the image the whole tradition still uses. A flame passed from one candle to another? Is the second the same flame? No. Completely different? Also no. The Milindapanha uses that image for one question only. Does anything transmigrate? Its answer is no. Nothing solid jumped across, no little ball of light traveled. The second flame exists because of the first, and the text doesn't try to make it more mechanical than that. That momentum, in Buddhist terms, is karma, literally action, not cosmic reward points, just this. Every intentional act shapes the pattern that keeps unfolding. Rebirth, then, isn't you moving into a new body. It's the pattern continuing, like the flame, like a wave that crosses an ocean. No single drop travels, but the wave arrives. Now, fair warning, Buddhist traditions describe the details differently, and it's worth knowing who says what. Theravada, the oldest surviving school, teaches rebirth as immediate. The last moment of this life conditions the first moment of the next. Flame to candle, no gap. Tibetan Buddhism describes an in-between journey, the bardo, up to 49 days of visions between lives, mapped in the famous Tibetan Book of the Dead. And Zen? Zen tends to lean over the whole debate and whisper, "You are being reborn right now. This breath, this moment. Watch that first. Different maps. But look at what every school agrees on. What continues is not a little unchanging you. It's consequence. It's momentum. It's what your actions set in motion. Which means, and this is the sharp edge of the teaching, the question, what happens to me after death, contains a hidden mistake. The me it imagines was never standing still to begin with. And the final goal isn't a better rebirth at all. It's nirvana, blowing out, unbinding, the fire of grasping no longer fed. The one who is freed, MN 72 says, is deep, hard to fathom, like the ocean. We've circled back to Vacha's flame. So Buddhism's honest answer has 3 layers. A story about acceptance, a refusal to feed speculation, and a mechanics of continuation without a soul. But there's one more piece, the one the Buddha actually considered urgent. Here's a detail that surprises people. The Buddha told his monks to think about death on purpose, regularly. It has a name, Maranasati, mindfulness of death. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya, Suttas 6.19 and 6.20. In one version, he asks the monks how often they reflect that they might die. One says daily, another says every meal. The Buddha's standard? Every breath. Not to be morbid, the opposite. In the Buddhist frame, forgetting death is what makes us sleepwalk, postponing what matters, clinging to what doesn't. Remembering it is what woke Kisa Gotami up. The mustard seeds never revived her son, they revived her. That's the move the Buddha kept making. People brought him metaphysics. He handed back urgency. You have the arrow. You have this breath. Begin. If you want to test drive the teaching tonight, it's one question at the end of the day. If this had been my last day, did I spend it on what matters? Not as guilt, as a compass. AN 6.19 praises the monk who keeps death one breath away. That's the one, the Buddha says, who reaches the end. Which brings us to the last scene of the Buddha's own life. Because when his death came at 80, he answered the question one final time. Not with words about the afterlife, with instructions. The Mahaparinibbana Sutta, Digha Nikaya 16, records his final night in a grove at Kusinara. Disciples wept. He asked one last time if anyone had questions. Silence. Then he gave his actual last words, not the fake quote you've seen online, the real one, preserved in Pali. All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. Everything assembled comes apart. Bodies, cities, stars. This video. You. Me. He didn't soften it on his deathbed. And then, strive on. Don't waste the light you have. 2,500 years later, that might still be the most honest answer anyone has given to the question, what happens after you die? First, live. Deliberately. Now. Next time, someone asked the Buddha why we can never stop wanting things, and his answer explains everything from doom scrolling to heartbreak. If big questions with real sources are your thing, subscribe. See you there.